Hey, this is Eason with Main Source Real Estate. We got a new series, Somebody Asked Me. I get a lot of phone calls from people, so I decided to create a new series where we ask questions of experts to get the very answers that you need. Today's special guest is Mr. Clinton Killian, an attorney who specializes in real estate, probate, and business. Let's go check him out.
So, I have a bad tenant. They're being very difficult, not communicating with me properly, not allowing me access to the property. What are some of my remedies you recommend that I should think about dealing with a so-called bad tenant?
Well, it depends. It really isn't a bad tenant. There's a bad structural relationship between the landlord and the tenant. You see, even though someone is living in property you own, and even though you know this person because you met them before they moved in and you did a background check and you go by the property and you say hi to them and all of this, you, bottom line, are entering a business relationship. And like any business relationship, the terms and the conditions of that relationship have to be explicit and detailed and in writing and agreed by both parties. In California, once the tenant moves in, that is your relationship, whatever you've agreed to in writing. For you to change that relationship means that you have to have the tenant's permission. And if you don't have the permission, you as the landlord are in violation of the lease. I'll give you an example. I had a client who rented a house to a tenant, and under the terms of the lease, the landlord agreed to pay the water. It's a duplex, there's only 1 meter. 2 people don't use that much water in 2 different units. And so the landlord says it's easier for me just to pay the water and not try to charge each individual tenant half of the water bill. Right. Well, what happened? One of the tenants decided that he was going to use the driveway as his little home car detailing and car washing business. So at 8 o'clock every morning, there's people dropping cars off, and he's using the landlord's water to wash all these cars from 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock every day. The other tenant in the other duplex, when she moved in, she had herself, her boyfriend, and their child. 3 people in a 3-bedroom apartment. Well, now she has herself, her child, her boyfriend, the boyfriend's brother, her sister, a cousin from Wisconsin, and God knows who else is in there. So the landlord's water bill went from about $200 a month between these 2 tenants to about $1,600 a month. So the first thing he did was say, okay, I'm changing the lease to make you 2 pay half the water bill. Well, that's a change of terms of your original lease, and he needs their permission to do that. Well, they both objected. They filed a complaint with the rent board that this is a change of lease and that he's being asked to pay more for a service that they got otherwise. And the rent board ruled in favor of the tenants. And now the landlord is stuck with, an 800% increase in the water bill that now he has to eat. And little things occur like that. I had a landlord who in the garage of his building, he had a washer dryer. He let the tenants use it for free, and that was part of what services he provided when they moved in. Well, the washer and dryer broke down. And he's like, you know what, I don't want to replace these, so he just pulled them out. Well, the tenant said, wait a minute, you decreased our services. When I signed the lease, there was a washer and dryer available for me to wash my clothes. And now you've taken that away, so that reduces what I should pay you in rent. And again, the landlord agreed. The rent board agreed with the tenants. So now the landlord was faced with a choice of either putting a new washer and dryer in or reducing the rent to compensate the tenants for the loss of a service. So it's less that there's a problem tenant than it is you're not taking the time to make all the rules and regulations and terms of the lease explicitly clear. One of the things I always advise my clients, in addition to a standard lease that you get some pre-printed form, you number one, look at the ordinance in the city that your property is located. And number two, you write a list of house rules and regulations. Even if you're just renting a single family house, you want to make sure everything is clear, what the tenant's rights and responsibilities are. For example, is the tenant going to water the lawn or the plants that you've spent money and planted at the house? Or is that your responsibility as the landlord? When the leaves fall off the tree and they start accumulating on the sidewalk and driveway, whose responsibility is to clean it? Even though you're renting an entire house to one tenant, you have neighbors. And most cities have a noise ordinance. So do you want your tenant having loud parties or big parties and the neighbors complaining to the police and the police calling you as the landlord and saying you are now responsible for this nuisance that your tenants are creating? And if you don't have an agreement that says you can't have loud parties after 10 o'clock, then you don't have a recourse against your tenant. Or, for example, you rent a house to a tenant. How many people can actually live there? Tenant says, okay, I'm renting this house for $4,000 a month, but I'm going to sublease it to 7 people, and I'm going to charge each of them $1,000 to live here. So I'm making $7,000 a month as a tenant, and I'm paying you $4,000 for the house, and I'm pocketing $3,000. So I'm making more than you as the landlord. Well, but again, that's why you put it in writing. As tenant, you're renting this house for you, X, and X. The total rent is X. Anybody else who moves in here has to pay an additional amount of X. Fourthly, as the landlord, you have to regularly inspect your premises.
How often?
It depends how big it is, how many tenants you have, and whether you have someone on site. If you have a multi-unit building, even if you don't have an on-site manager, it's to your benefit to have a relationship with one of the tenants who will be your informal on-site manager. This person will make sure the garbage is picked up every week, that the garbage is right in the right place to be picked up, that there's not tenants moving 8 people in when the lease says only 2 people can live there. Just your eyes and ears on the premises. If you don't have that, at a minimum, you should inspect your property externally once a month. Go by the property, walk the premises. You don't have to go inside the house, but walk around your house, see what's going on. You should at least inspect your house inside every 6 months. Make sure the smoke detectors work. Make sure your carbon monoxide detectors work. Make sure there's no damage inside. Make sure there's no exposed wiring, leaking pipes. All the kind of little things that a tenant won't tell you about, but can cause substantial damage to your property. I had a client. There was a small leak in the unit in the bathroom. Not enough to really that it bothered the tenant. All she did was put a little pan underneath it. That water dripped constantly. It overflowed. It started rotting the floor. When he finally found out about it, she's complaining that the bathroom's unusable because she stepped on the floor and her foot nearly went through the floor, and now she doesn't feel comfortable going to the bathroom. So now they have to spend thousands of dollars to fix and repair the bathroom but she had to be displaced while work was being done. So he had to put her up in a hotel. He had to pay her compensation, and what could have been something he could have spotted in a simple, 6-month inspection and fixed it right then and there wound up costing him tens of thousands of dollars. So if you own any type of rental property, whether you personally inspect it or you have a professional inspecting it or you have somebody who knows what they're looking at, make a checklist of basic things in your property that should be inspected. One of the things about walking around the outside of the house, you can see if there's any spigots or hoses outside that are leaking. Whether you see anything like exposed wiring, exposed pipes, anything that says to you, maybe I should fix that. Because you cannot rely on the tenant. You plant hundreds of dollars worth of landscape plants and the tenant doesn't water them and you come back a year later and all you got is dirt, the tenant's not gonna say, oh yeah, I forgot to water it. My bad, I'll pay for those. Tenant's like, it's not my job.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's not just sit on your behind and collect rent. You are now running a business and you have to treat it as such. If you had a McDonald's franchise, are you gonna go by every day to make sure when the doors open on time, that the kitchen is clean, that all the workers showed up? If you're not doing all of that, you're gonna have someone there doing it. Well, you have to treat rental property the same way.
Wow, great episode. I want to say thanks again to our special guest, Mr. Clinton Killian. And just remember, somebody asked me, and I'm going to ask them. Tune in next time.